lovelies, this is Starlight Lively Cosplay, and I'm very pleased to be part of the Good Omens read-along that was organized and put together by Division 10 with the blessing of Neil Gaiman. Do check out the rest of the playlist to watch the videos from the other cosplayers and talented readers that are participating. We are going to be reading the entire book, and there should be several people reading each part of the book, each section. And enjoy, and don't forget to check out the rest of the playlist. I will be reading from the Saturday section of the book. Good Omens, or The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, Witch, written by Neil Gaiman and Sir Terry Pratchett. Aziraphale was dithering. He'd been dithering for some 12 hours. His nerves, he would have said, were all over the place. He walked around the shop, picking up bits of paper and dropping them again, fiddling with pens. He ought to tell Crowley. No, he didn't. He wanted to tell Crowley. He ought to tell Heaven. He was an angel, after all. You had to do the right thing. It was built in. You see a while, you thwart. Crowley had put his finger on it right enough. He ought to have told Heaven right from the start. But he'd known him for thousands of years. They got along. They nearly understood one another. He sometimes suspected they had far more in common with one another than with their respective supervisors. They both liked the world, for one thing, rather than viewing it simply as the board on which the cosmic game of chess was being played. Well, of course, that was it. That was the answer staring him in the face. It'd be true to the spirit of his pact with Crowley if he kept Heaven the wink, and then they could quietly do something about the child. Although nothing too bad, of course, because we were all God's creatures when you put it down to it. Even people like Crowley and the Antichrist. And the world would be saved, and there wouldn't have to be all that Armageddon business, which would do nobody any good anyway, because everyone knew Heaven would win in the end, and Crowley would be bound to understand. Yes, and then everything would be all right. There was a knock at the shop door, despite the closed sign. He ignored it. Getting in touch with Heaven for two-way communications was far more difficult for Aziraphale than it is for humans, who don't expect an answer and in nearly all cases would be rather surprised to get one. He pushed aside the paper-laden desk and rolled up the threadbare bookshop carpet. There was a small circle chalked in the floorboards underneath, surrounded by suitable passages from the Kabbalah. The angel lit 7 candles, which he placed ritually at certain points around the circle. Then he lit some incense, which was not necessary, but did make the place smell nice. And then he stood in the circle and said the words. Nothing happened. He said the words again. Eventually, a bright blue shaft of light shot down from the ceiling and filled the circle. A well-educated voice said, "Well, it's me, Aziraphale." "We know," said the voice. "I've got great news. I've located the Antichrist. I can give you his address and everything." There was a pause. The blue light flickered. "Well," it said again. "But you see, you can stop it all happening. In the nick of time. You've only got a few hours. You can stop it all, and there needn't be the war, and everyone will be saved." He beamed madly into the light. "Yes," said the voice. "Yes, he's in a place called Lower Chatfield, and the address—" "Well done," said the voice, in flat, dead tones. "There doesn't have to be any of that business with 1/3 of the seas turning to blood or anything," said Aziraphale happily. When it came, the voice sounded slightly annoyed. "Why not?" it said. Aziraphale felt an icy pit opening under his enthusiasm, and tried to pretend it wasn't happening. He plunged on. "Well, you can simply make sure that we will win, Aziraphale." "Yes, but—" "The forces of darkness must be beaten. You seem to be under a misapprehension. The point is not to avoid the war, it is to win it. We have been waiting a long time, Aziraphale." Aziraphale felt the coldness envelop his mind. He opened his mouth to say, "Do you think perhaps it would be a good idea not to hold the war on Earth?" but changed his mind. "I see," he said grimly. There was a scraping near the door, and if Aziraphale had been looking in that direction, he would have seen a battered felt hat trying to peer over the fanlight. "This is not to say you have not performed well," said the voice. "You will receive a commendation. Well done." "Thank you," said Aziraphale. The bitterness in his voice would have soured milk. "I'd forgotten about ineffability, of course." "We thought you had." "May I ask," said the angel, "to whom I have been speaking?" The voice said, "We are the Metatron." Footnote: the voice of God, but not the voice of God. An entity in its own right. Rather like a presidential spokesperson. "Oh, yes, of course. Oh, well, thank you very much, thank you." Behind him, the letterbox tilted open, revealing a pair of eyes. "One other thing," said the voice. "You will of course be joining us, won't you?" "Well, of course it has been simply ages since I've held a flaming sword," Aziraphale began. "Yes, we recall," said the voice. "You will have a lot of opportunity to relearn." What sort of initiating event will precipitate the war?" said Aziraphale. "We thought a multi-nation nuclear exchange would be a nice start." "Oh, yes, very imaginative." Aziraphale's voice was flat and hopeless. "Good, we will expect you directly then," said the voice. Well, I'll just clear up a few business matters, shall I?" said Aziraphale desperately. "There hardly seems to be any necessity," said the Metatron. Aziraphale drew himself up. "I really feel that probity, not to say morality, demands that as a reputable businessman I should—" "Yes, yes," said the Metatron, a shade testily. "Point taken. We shall await you then." The light faded, but did not quite vanish. "They're leaving the line open," Aziraphale thought. "I'm not getting out of this one." "Hello?" he said softly. "Anyone still there?" There was silence. Very carefully he stepped over the circle and crept to the telephone. He opened his notebook and dialed another number. After 4 rings it gave a little cough, followed by a pause, and then a voice which sounded so laid back you could put a carpet on it said, "Hi, this is Anthony Crowley. Crowley!" Aziraphale tried to hiss and shout at the same time. "Listen, I haven't got much time. Probably not in right now, or asleep, and busy, or something, but—" "Shut up! Listen, it was in Tadfield. It's all in that book. You've got to stop." "After the tone, and I'll get right back to you. Ciao." "I want to talk to you now." "Beep! Stop making noises. It's in Tadfield. That was what I was sensing. You must go there and—" He took the phone away from his mouth. "Bugger," he said. It was the first time he'd sworn in more than 6,000 years. Hold on. The demon had another line, didn't he? He was that kind of person. Aziraphale fumbled in the book, nearly dropping it on the floor. They would be getting impatient soon. He found the other number. He dialed it. It was answered almost immediately, at the same time as the shop's bell tingled gently. Crowley's voice, getting louder as it neared the mouthpiece, said, "Really mean it." "Hello?" "Crowley, it's me." The voice was horribly noncommittal. Even in his present state, Aziraphale sensed trouble. "Are you alone?" he said cautiously. "No, got an old friend here." "Listen! Away with ye, ye spawn of hell!" Very slowly, Aziraphale turned around. Shadwell was trembling with excitement. He'd seen it all. He'd heard it all. He hadn't understood any of it, but he knew what people did with candles and candlesticks and incense. He knew that all right. He'd seen The Devil Rides Out 15 times. 16 times if you included the time he'd been thrown out of the cinema for shouting his unflattering opinions of amateur witchfinder Christopher Lee. The buggers were using him. They'd been making fools out of the glorious traditions of the army. "I'll have you, ye evil bugger," he shouted, advancing like a moth-eating avenging angel. "I ken what ye be about, coming up here and seducing women to do ye evil will." "I think perhaps you've got the wrong shop," said Aziraphale. "I'll call back later," he told the receiver, and hung up. "I could see what you were about," snarled Shadwell. There were flecks of foam around his mouth. He was more angry than he could ever remember. Things are not what they seem, Aziraphale began, aware even as he said it that as conversational gambits went, it lacked a certain polish. I bet they ain't, said Shadwell triumphantly. No, I mean, without taking his eyes off the angel, Shadwell shuffled backwards and grabbed the shop door, slamming it so hard that the bell jangled. Bell, he said. He grabbed the nice and accurate prophecies and thumped it down heavily on the table. Book, he snarled. He fumbled in his pocket and produced his trusty Ronson. Practically candle, he shouted, and began to advance. In his path, the circle glowed with a faint blue light. Said Aziraphale, I think it might not be a very good idea to... Shadwell wasn't listening. By the powers invested in me, by virtue of my office a witchfinder, he intoned, I charge you to quit from this place. You see, the candle, and return henceforth to the place from whence ye came, pausing not to. It would really be unwise for a human to set foot in without, and deliver us for evil. Keep out of the circle, you stupid man, never to come again to vex. Yes, 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 but please keep out of... Aziraphale ran toward Shadwell, waving his hands urgently. Returning, nay more, Shadwell finished. He pointed a vengeful black-nailed finger. Aziraphale looked down at his feet and swore for the second time in 5 minutes. He'd stepped inside the circle. Oh, blast, he said. There was a melodious twang, and the blue glow vanished. So did Aziraphale. 30 seconds went by. Shadwell didn't move. Then, with a trembling left hand, he reached up and carefully lowered his right hand. Hello? He said. Hello? No one answered. Shadwell shivered. Then, with his hand held out in front of him, like a gun that he didn't dare fire and didn't know how to unload, he stepped out into the street, letting the door slam behind him. It shook the floor. One of Aziraphale's candles fell over, spilling burning wax across the old, dry wood. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you again to Division 10 for putting all of this together. And thank you again so much to Neil Gaiman for allowing us to record this. I hope you enjoy watching the rest of the playlist. We will be doing the entire book. And I hope that you are safe and that you are able to keep in contact with those that you love. And from me to you, be well, wash your hands, take care of yourself, and be kind. Thank you. Bye. Oh, and here's a Chessie cat to say hello as well.